Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wolfe, and I'm a fellow at the Cornell Institute for Public Affairs. As you can see from my slide, what I would like to look at is looking at how we talk to one another. What I just noticed just a moment ago is many of you were looking at your mobile devices and your phones. Probably most, if not all of you, were looking at social media. Now, oftentimes when looking at social media, a small event that happens in a small town can become something large and complex and something that we can view from quite literally all over the world. 4 words: in God we trust. Over the past few months throughout the United States and the Midwest and the South primarily, we've been seeing these 4 words pop up on the back of police vehicles, which of course are government vehicles in one respect or another. Now, in God we trust has been a motto of the United States since 1956. However, it's been on government materials such as coins and money and government facilities since the mid to early 19th century. So, how I found out about what's been going on about these 4 words and how people feel about these words is somebody shared with me about something they saw on Facebook when I talked about my topic with them. So on this exchange, which I'm sure that many of you have seen in one way or another, somebody posted the article sharing that one of these police forces put "In God We Trust" on the back of a squad car. Their opinion, as you can read, is they said that they don't care if it offends a non-believer because it's their belief that counts for them. Somebody with a differing mental model said, but you're not displaying it on a government vehicle. Somebody else chimes in and says, well, who cares about what vehicle it is? Why does it matter, right? Too many people in this country are too politically correct. That was a problem that they saw from their perspective. Then again, we see this a lot when people talk about speech and the freedom of speech. People take the legal perspective and viewpoint and talk about the Constitution. This person's interpretation of the Constitution is that a government vehicle isn't a place to promote religion or politics. And that was their view of what this government vehicle was doing. So taking a systems thinking approach, looking at this at a glance, just very generally. So as I said, we know that the police are a government force, either from the tier of federal, state, or local. And since they each have a police force, for the majority of these cases, I'm not sure about all, what they do is they take a police board and they have a vote if there's any changes to decals or how the police force are going to present themselves. And they voted to have "In God We Trust" on the vehicles where you do see those 4 words. So what I like to think of, and I'm sure all of us do as public policy students, is we want to know, well, what do people think? So with public opinion, just real quick, a Gallup poll that recently surveyed displays of religion on public places and especially in government settings and government property, most people found that all religions, if all religions are represented, that's totally fine. 10% felt that if there was only Christian references, that was fine by them. And close to 30% thought it wasn't acceptable to have any mention of religion or spirituality on government property. Now, the thing that I like about public opinion is it tells us what people think, but it doesn't tell us why. So, drilling down in systems thinking, we know that we need to make distinctions. So, a common distinction that American political theorists often make is that we have this binary system, right? We have liberals, we have conservatives. So, one thing that I was trying to do with my mapping was looking at what people were trying to get after when they had an opinion about these 4 words. And I try to organize it in a fashion to see what people were aiming to achieve and what they were attempting to avoid. So what I found was many different pieces, right? So something really interesting happened when I was doing my mapping. I was finding that as I was making distinctions, a lot of these words, especially when I placed them side by side, were really synonymous. So when I was looking at liberal aims versus conservative aims, and I intentionally didn't label either because I imagine if you guys are reading this, it might take you a few moments to figure out which is which, but this is liberal political thought, conservative political thought, again, just very generalized, that's a mental model in itself, and I noticed that opportunity is often synonymous with liberal thought, freedom is often synonymous with conservative thought, same with what they were trying to avoid. So looking more specifically at a glance of liberal avoidance, we have systems and relationships. So often a liberal argument that comes up is people want to avoid inferiority. So when you really take a look at this, which this is a very interesting, complex system in itself, you have a lot of oppression that people are trying to avoid by having the perspective of excluding others in speech. And this can lead to systemic oppression like racism, classism, homophobia, and so on. And then you have conservative avoidance, which a lot of people bring up the lack of individuality. Them as an individual, they have the perspective that if they believe something and if they are represented by their government, whatever that belief is, should be represented. So looking more at these relationships, how these all interact, I like to think of this as an action and then a reaction. So what's interesting between the relationship of the First Amendment from the Constitution of the United States and freedom, which is a core principle of it, is that our freedom is very much influenced by what is written in our First Amendment. And how we interpret this First Amendment is very much influenced on how we perceive freedom. So not to break down the First Amendment too much, because that's a whole very complex system in itself, but we have different freedoms that are specifically called out in the First Amendment, and also a restriction that we want to respect religion. Looking at relationships with perspectives is when things get really interesting. So if you look at freedom from the lens of American culture, you have, in this instance, religious identity. Many people have affiliations or don't have an affiliation. And then we also have a distinction of what, as an American culture, makes us different. So as I brought up earlier, it's kind of hard to read, but that says Soviet Union. In 1956, in response to the Red Scare, the United States adopted "In God We Trust" as our official motto, because we wanted to make ourselves distinct and separate from a nation state that identified themselves as atheist. So beyond religious identity, it gets even more complex. Now, trying to pull back a little bit more and thinking about how the individual may view their perspective and how they may make affiliations in one way or another with their mental models and thinking about freedom of speech, and specifically about the issue of having "In God We Trust" on the back of police vehicles, I try to make a map of what I think the self interprets with speech and communication through expressions. So you can't see in here because it's really small, but as an individual, we all have knowledge, right? And with our knowledge, this invokes feelings, and this also affirms or denies beliefs. And essentially, when we're communicating, we're expressing our feelings and our beliefs. And how do we do that? We do it through our speech. So we have verbal, we have written, or typed on Facebook, nonverbal. So, not that this is necessarily a solution, but this is something that I came across when I was finding images for this presentation. And something that I found both comical and interesting is that there's many different ways to look at this. It all depends on your perspectives, and your perspectives all depend on the distinctions you make. And as an individual, you're going to make different distinctions based upon your beliefs, and based upon your knowledge, from your experiences, and you're going to have a myriad of systems. Something, just to close this up really nice, that I thought was comical and fit quite well in this presentation is the police car that I showed you guys at the beginning of this presentation. That was from Childress, Texas, which is a very, very small town. And the chief of police got a letter from Annie, who is the president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and she was asking him to remove that from the police cars. He wrote her a letter saying no, so she sent him a friend request on Facebook. he denied that friend request, and this letter got really popular, and then he also later made a comment saying that he denied her friend request. Now, I would say, regardless of what you believe, regardless of what your mental models are, I have a challenge for you guys. Facebook has a very interesting algorithm. What it does in our news feeds is it affirms what we believe through a very complex algorithm. You're going to see news that you agree with because it learns who you are by what you like when you hit that like button. So if there is somebody who you know or who you think you know has a differing opinion, I dare you, I challenge you to add them. That will change what mental models you see on social media. That will change your mental models of what you think and what you believe and what you think you know.